Hello, friends, and welcome to episode number 18 of Nostalgia Talk. Oh my God, 18 episodes. I cannot believe that it's come this far, but here we are. I'm James, and before I start the show, as usual, I have some birthday shout outs. So, tomorrow, March 9th, or today, rather, because there's a good chance that this is going to be out on March the 9th. So, March 9th is the birthday of a past guest, Marty Robinson, also known as Snuffleupagus, Telly Monster, and Slimy the Worm for Sesame Street and a bunch of other stuff, and a friend and mentor of mine, somebody that I always have looked up to. So, Marty, happy birthday. And speaking of Marty Robinson, I just found out that the show that I did with Marty is now the most popular Nostalgia Talk episode I have done. So, thank you guys for checking that out. And not just that one, but all of them. I'm really glad that you guys are enjoying this. And today, and when I say today, I mean March 8th, recording day, is the birthday of Bob Bergen, also known as Porky Pig, Tweety, Marvin the Martian for Looney Tunes. So to you, I say, happy birthday, Bob. Couldn't resist. And finally, I do actually have a special shout out to somebody who has never been on the podcast, but I've talked about her before. Some of you guys probably know that I have a best friend who lives overseas. And for those of you who aren't aware of that, I'll explain the story. She was born and raised in Singapore, has family on the street I grew up on in Waverley, Nova Scotia, and is currently going to school in Edinburgh in Scotland. My best friend, Sean, her birthday was yesterday, and so, Sean, if you are listening to this, I just wanted to say happy birthday. I miss you. I love you. We had our pizza night last night, and I really wish you could have been here for that. It just would have been a lot more fun to celebrate with you. And of course, my birthday's coming up soon. So hopefully when this pandemic is over, we'll be able to celebrate. So I miss you. Happy late birthday. I hope to see you again. And now I'm going to introduce the guest. Today on Nostalgia Talk, Paul Rudolph. Hey, Paul, sorry for the long
Hey,
intro.
please, that's totally fine. The shout outs are great.
Thank you very much. Now, for the listeners who are not aware, Paul is what you call Sesame Street's vocal music director. Would you mind explaining what that means?
Yeah, well, I wear a couple different hats. So yeah, one of them, my main job is as vocal music director. So I'm also a music editor, and I'm also one of the composers on the show. And I also music direct like the live shows that we do when we're performing outside of the studio, which are really fun shows. And hopefully we'll be doing those again soon after the pandemic's all done. Yeah, so vocal music director. So basically what happens with me in the order of how the show is made, everything upstream from me is basically decided upon: curriculum, scripts, writing, what scripts will have a music portion to it. And this I'm talking about the seasonal work. Like we just finished season 52. So for that, everything that happens upstream basically trickles down to me. I get the demo of the song. And the demo is basically the composer singing the song, not necessarily in the keys that our performers and our cast members would sing the song in. My first job is to find the best key. My second job is to teach that new song to the cast member. While we're doing that, we're recording it. I mean, I send it to them days in advance before we record it. But as we're recording it, I'm basically, they're learning the song. We're looking at the script to see what the emotion might be in the song, what comes before and after the song. And I'm also recording them in my office studio at Kaufman Astoria Studios. So I'm in one hand, I'm, running Pro Tools, and the other hand, I'm cueing them. And it works out really well in that capacity that I can do that at the studio because it's one very efficient, product for getting the vocal music to the stage. So I record them, I edit them, and that's why I'm considered a music editor as well, because I'm taking all those vocals, I'm piecing those together and comping the best takes or the best emotion or whatever, best rhythms, all that stuff. I come up with a comp, and I collect all those vocals with the instrumental, and then I deliver that Pro Tools session to our incredibly capable and amazing A2, Chris Cesano. Chris Cesano will then play that song or songs back to the stage while we're taping the show. My other job is I'm on the set cueing our performers for that song. So if a song involves 4 or 5 different Muppets and, say, a celebrity guest or human cast member, I am literally below the cameras cueing our cast members as they sing the song. Because, as you probably know, our season is very compressed. We don't have a lot of time to maybe rehearse a song, or there's only one, shoot day basically per script. So we only have one portion of our day to shoot and finish that song. So it's not like we're going to do this live on set. Most of it is lip synced. I would say almost 90% of what we do is lip sync. So the vocals are pre-recorded. So I'm basically on set when it's finalized and we're shooting the actual filming of the song. I'm helping the performer to enter and exit the song, where they come in, where they stop, held notes, just like a choir director would do for a normal choir performance. But the performers have a lot to do, and I'm sure you've interviewed puppeteers with this. They're looking at a monitor, they're holding up their puppet. They might have a microphone live to do dialogue in and out of the song, or even within the song. They've got all these things to think about. So my job is to not be distracting with my cueing, but also to help them. So I'm not sitting there conducting the song. I'm basically pointing or yelling, depending on how far away I am, Abby, in, Rosita, Elmo, and, trying to help them, because I can yell on set because it's all pre-recorded anyway, right? Nobody's going to hear me. If we are, in the rare instance doing a live song, then of course I'm, cueing them very quietly, or I'll have a keyboard on set, or we've, hired a keyboard player for the day to do something live like that. So in a nutshell, that's what a vocal music director does for Sesame Street. My predecessor, Dave Connor, who passed away a few years ago, was super helpful with me, giving me the ultimate range chart, the Bible of all of our characters. And you've stopped me if you've talked to other puppeteers about this sort of thing, but character range is super important for their voices. So my wife, for instance, Leslie, who's Abby Cadabby, she has a very specific range for that character. If she gets too low, it can lose energy and not sound like Abby. If it gets too high, for any character, Cookie Monster, Elmo, or any other Muppet character, it starts to sound strained. So I really have to find that good balance of where that key is. And Dave Connor handed me this sheet of paper that had all of the character ranges on it. So that's where I start. That's how, I get into a song. I start to look at the melody. I also think about the characters that are in the song. And let's say it's Ernie and Elmo. Well, there might not be a great key for the song for them to be paired together. So I have to find the best key that works for both of them. We call it, it's the diplomatic key. And something like the Macy's Parade, there's 18 different Muppet voices on that. All of our Sesame Street cast is on that, including, some of our human cast members. So I have to find a really good key for that. The fun part about that, which I love doing, is arranging harmonies with this cast, because you want characters to speak, to, stick out and be heard amongst each other, right? You don't want all of the higher soprano voices, let's say Prairie Dawn, Elmo, Abby. You don't want them to all be together on the same notes all the time, because they start to blend as a trio and it might just sound like one voice. I like to split those up. I like to put Prairie Dawn even higher, Elmo below her, Abby below her, Rosita in there, Zoe. So all those soprano and alto voices can be their own little choir amongst all the other male voices. So that's the fun part for me, is as a vocal music director, I'm also, arranging the songs too for the vocals. And that, my experience with that goes back to Muppets Tonight, working with character voices. And that's when I really learned about it back then. Does that give you enough examples of what I do as a...
So let me try to break it down. So basically, when it comes to song lyrics, I'm not going to use a Sesame Street song to explain this. I'm going to use a song from my childhood that shall not be named, because everyone listening probably is not going to be surprised by this. But basically, if the lyrics were "Ain't nothing but a heartache, ain't nothing but a mistake," then you'd be the one to have it sound like, "Tell me why he ain't nothing but a heartache. Tell me why he ain't nothing but a mistake."
Well, and see, there's your range right there. That's your range as you feel comfortable doing that. But now, envision Cookie Monster doing that, an octave down, super low, and yet still through all that wonderful character gravel that David Rudman brings to Cookie Monster and Frank Oz did, making that still work as a song. And the finest example of that for a character voice like David's, like Cookie Monster, is when we did Me Am What Me Am.
Oh
and,
yeah.
and and Cookie Monster was singing about being a veggie monster, which is a question, I get all the time from
I
fans.
still hear it to this day for
Is
the
Cookie
last
Monster a
15
veggie monster?
years.
Yeah, every few years, kind of fun to kind of go back, and Cookie Monster will always say, well, cookies are a sometimes food, veggies are a sometimes food.
Oh yeah,
But
that'll certainly help the rumors.
oh yeah, sure. So that the song "Me Am What Me Am," if you look at that on YouTube and listen to David Rudman executing that song, it's amazing because it's a serious ballad, and Cookie is coming from a very emotional place, a comedic emotional place, but emotional place just the same. And so he and I spent a lot of time. It was probably for a 2.5, 3 minute song, we probably spent about 90 minutes in the studio on that, really finding that voice for him, because he wanted characters with that kind of edge or that gravel, that roughness to it, like Telly Monster included. I'll ask them in a session to take away a little bit of that gravel, to kind of make it a little bit more, I won't say musical because what they're already doing is musical, but it just makes pitches clearer, I guess. And I will only ask them to take 10% away because I don't want them to lose the character. If David Rudman takes too much gravel away from Cookie Monster, it might start to sound like David Rudman. Or if Marty takes away too much from Telly, it's going to sound like Marty. So that's not my goal. My goal is to find the emotion in the song and say, okay, well, can we take away a little of the and make this a ballad? And that was the challenge with David and that song, and it was so fun to work through that with him. Plus it was just Eli Bowling, one of our composers, wrote that, and Eli is like Sondheim's spawn. He can do anything Broadway in terms of writing a song, chord progressions that sound like it belongs on Broadway. And he just nailed it with the song. And so I had all these background veggie voices that were building this giant build at the end. Look that one up if you haven't already seen it. It's really fun.
I do remember seeing behind the scenes footage from that song, and I remember seeing Tyler Bunch playing a piano player with a future guest on Nostalgia Talk, by the way. I'm announcing that now. Ricky Boyd, who's going to be coming here in April.
Ricky has so many stories. He has so many amazing Jim Henson stories. No spoilers. He's just incredible. And my wife's a good friend of Ricky's. They were in a show.
Was it Animal Jam?
Animal Jam, of course. Together.
I used to love that show.
Ricky's character on that was so great. He was like, we always joked, Leslie's here, I should yell and say, I don't remember his character name, and forgive me, fans, if I don't.
Who, Ricky's character?
Ricky's character. Leslie's character was Edie Waffle. Edie and Waffle. It was like this little Ross Perot looking puppet. We always joked about that it was Ross Perot. Maybe you're too young to know Ross Perot.
But no, I know who Ross Perot is. They had a Muppet, H. Ross Parrot.
Oh, perfect. Well, his voice was just perfect, and it was so bright and had that little twang to it. It was a great show. I went to Florida. Leslie and I were living in LA at the time, and I went to Florida to watch them film that. And it was so much fun to watch, especially the kids that would come in, the busloads of kids that would come in as the big group and dance around with the Muppets, or with the puppets that were in that show. I guess you could call them Muppets. I don't know if they were officially. Yeah, they were built by Henson.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had some lead character kids that were cast, members as the lead kids, but then they would bring these kids in that were just, bussed in from schools and other organizations and put them in identical T-shirts, and they just do all these amazing animal jams. They do these dances. It was really fun to watch.
I'll tell Ricky hi for you when I chat with him.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, he and Leslie had a call early on in the pandemic. I think it was back in May, and I was just a fly on the wall listening to them chat, and he was on speakerphone, and it was probably a 2-hour call, and both Leslie and I, our jaws were just dropping. Like, wait, that happened? You and Jim Henson? So that's all I'll say.
Well, I Tyler Bunch had said that Ricky was doing the assisting of the piano player. And for the listeners who have seen that segment with Cookie Monster that Paul was referring to, Me Am What Me Am, there was an alternate skit that was recorded featuring a background band that was never used. And Tyler Bunch, who plays Elmo's dad, was doing a piano player, and Ricky Boyd was doing the hands. And I said to Ricky, how do you do it? And he said, Paul Rudolph kind of helped me out, and I just faked the rest.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks.
That was
Well,
his
and
answer.
that's honestly, that's a nice shout out, because it's, that's one thing I'm inspired by from Jim Henson is, from watching the Muppet Show when I was a kid growing up. It's the accuracy of music with puppeteering. And if like one of my favorite things, which I had nothing to do with, but I love it, is the Bohemian Rhapsody Muppet version that they
Oh,
did
yeah.
back when Disney had acquired the Muppets. It was one of the first things they did. And I knew a lot of those, still know a lot of those Muppeteers. And I think I'd asked Dave Goles, because he had worked on not only the video, but super specific parts of the video. And I think he said, I may be getting the hours not exactly right, but I think he said they spent 2 hours on the guitar solo.
Ooh.
Like just filming the guitar solo to make it look right. And which is also, as a drummer, it's what I love about Animal. He when he hits a cymbal, I know it's a fake cymbal now. When I was a kid, I didn't, but I know it's not real, but he makes it look real. And I also worked with Eric Jacobson and Misha when Misha was assisting Eric as Animal on the Dave Grohl drum battle on the Muppets for Disney, which was in 2016. My good friend Brad Elliott was working on that as a prop master, and he brought me in to be Animal's drum tech that day.
Oh, cool.
So, and I had seen Animal on Muppets Tonight perform by Frank Oz, but I had never seen the really up close way that the two puppeteers perform and play with Animal, and watching the way Misha, performs the drumsticks. As a drummer, I can tell you, it's all about fulcrum and wrist and action reaction. When the drum hits something, it reacts back to it. Misha has this way where the rod comes straight up. I know your listeners can't see me, but the rod comes straight up from his arm. And then there's like kind of almost like a 45-degree angle with the drumstick. So he's not so much fulcruming with his arm as he is pistoning up and down, which is incredibly hard to do fast and get the rhythms right. And he's basically hitting the rims of the drums, which is, to a drummer, it's not the way you would think about drumming. Obviously, you would want to hit, the center of the head or the edge of the head if you want to get a different sound. But with the way those Muppet, drums are built, it's not really a plastic head. It's more like fabric. That's the drum head itself. So to get that action reaction feel and make it look believable, Misha's actually more hitting the rims than anything else. But it looks amazing. And when it's all finished and, an actual drummer has overdubbed the sound and everything, it blows me away. So thank you to Ricky for for thanking me for helping him with the piano, because I'm a piano player as well. I started as a keyboard player when I was a kid. It's the look of the fingers too, and because, well, Louie and Cookie Monster, any puppet with live hands, it's that much more important to me to make it look believable, because they have fingers and they can actually do little arpeggios and things on a piano that maybe a rod puppet would just approach it differently. Elmo and Abby as rod puppeteers, and their assists, John Kennedy does a wonderful job with Leslie as Abby as a guitar player. It's just so fun to watch him, because he'll do both hands sometimes as the guitar player.
Oh,
and
wow.
Leslie's only puppeteering, the mouth. It depends on, depends on the song, depends on movement, depends on a lot of things. And sometimes the Henson Company too, Jason and Lars and all those wonderful magicians at Henson will rig the puppet in a way that allows it to be more musical too. They'll rig the puppet so that the left hand on the guitar or the right hand, as the case may be, can slide up and down the fret, the neck of the guitar. So it looks that much more believable. It's not just stuck there. It's moving, it's sliding around. And then the other hand is of course strumming. So I love it. That's my the funnest moments for me walking on set or walking by the Henson Company desks and all their stuff and tables, and seeing, not only what, Muppets are a part of the show that day, Guy Smiley's there and I'm smiling, but also seeing what music.
You're a Guy Smiley yourself.
Love it. I'm such a fan. But also like props and things, seeing a remote control car. Oh, we're going to use that today. Or there's a broccoli puppet, it's like, that to me is the magic. And that's why we do it for the audience, the kids and the fans,
Amazing.
So
what were some of your, I can't talk today. What were some of your earliest influences in music?
Wow, I was just telling somebody this the other day. I'll date myself here, but my parents, my sister and I both took piano lessons to start. My dad was a drummer. My mom was a piano player. She also played French horn and
Oh,
trumpet.
cool.
So uh, my sister and I both hated piano lessons when we started. We had a horrible teacher, this red-haired, chain-smoking piano teacher, and we just hated it. So
Yikes.
eventually, once we got to good teachers, we started loving it. We would perform, like at the mall or in little competitions and things. Where you're only competing against yourself. You get these little gold cups if you get a first and all this stuff. So, and a lot of the kids in our neighborhood would take from either the same piano teacher, or we would have concerts with like multiple piano teachers would come together and say, hey, let's bring 15 students together, we'll all have a recital, it'll be great. So my parents influenced me obviously early on. Classical piano, yes, but also my own foray into rock and roll and pop music and things, and learning from buying a piece of sheet music. In fact, I have a copy of Bohemian Rhapsody from when I was a kid, and I learned every note of that on piano. So I learned the guitar solo on piano, and I'd listen
Oh,
to the recording and
wow.
try and get it just right. And I remember, because when you buy a piano sheet music that's basically trying to mimic a pop song or a rock and roll song, you're often asking a piano to do what a guitar does, play open fifths and distorted and all that. And I always questioned like the sound because I didn't have a guitar. And I even remember asking my mom and my piano teacher, is it okay to play the notes that are not written? Because I was so classically trained. Classically trained, you're learning a Clemente, whatever, sonatina or a Bach piece, you have to play the notes that are on the page. There's no question about it. You can't look at the chord and go, oh, that's a C7. I can play an E or a G, whereas with pop music and rock and roll, I could look at the chord and say, well, the guitar player sounds like he's doing this. And what if I did that on piano? Would it sound the same? And which was kind of my frustration as a, young musician, frustration in that it didn't sound like rock and roll from a guitar. But that's why I gravitated towards pop music that had a piano influence, like Elton John or REO Speedwagon or Billy Joel. Those Styx, especially Styx, was one of my main influences as a rock and roll keyboardist, I guess you'd say. But drumming was a big part of that too early on for me. And my dad gave me my first drum lessons. I had an old drum kit that he had used in college, and with summer job money, I would buy like a hi-hat stand, and I'd buy a cymbal, and I just build up this drum set. And in that, Van Halen 1 was my first. I wore that album out playing along with that, with my Pioneer headphones on and playing along with Jamie's Crying or whatever. And Queen, Live Killers. That was another album that I just listened to and played over and over. I think the first 45 I ever had was Eddie Money, Baby Hold On to Me. And it was when I first had a hi-hat, and there was a big breakdown in the song that had a cool hi-hat thing in it. So
Nice.
this is probably, I'm trying to think about your listeners and think, why is he talking about Eddie Money and he's, works for Sesame Street. But you asked, that was my influences basically were pop music. My dad listened to a lot of jazz when I was a kid. So he listened to Dave Brubeck. And this kind of fast forwards to my percussion group, Glank. Dave Brubeck played in a lot of odd time signatures. My dad had the album Time Out, which had a couple great songs on it that I always will remember. One of which was Take 5, which is in 5, and another called Blue Rondo a la Turk, which is kind of mostly in 7. And I remember, as a kid listening to those, just loving that feel, but I didn't know what 5/4 meant. I didn't know what in 7 meant until I started learning that when I was learning piano and drums. And there's something really comfortable for me going back to listening to something in 5. And if you look at your fingers, you have 5 fingers, so you can just sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. It just feels good. It feels natural. So in my percussion group, I try to write things that are in odd time signatures that kind of harkens back to that. That was definitely an influence for me. And then humor in music influenced me a lot. My sister and I, my parents took us to see Victor Borge
Oh,
when I was probably
cool.
10 years old at Illinois State University. And seeing the humor come off the stage with classical music blew me away, because to me, classical music was very serious. It was, you have to practice half an hour a day. You got a weekly piano lesson. You're working towards this recital that's coming. It's pretty serious. So watching Victor Borge have fun at the piano, and then he did his punctuation shtick, which my dad used to imitate. That was fun to me. So I finally saw this humor in music that I think carries to today. I mean, why else would I be having so much fun watching Louis or Cookie Monster play piano on Sesame Street? So, and then, later, like in high school and college, I think a lot of my influence then became more percussion oriented. That was my emphasis. In college, I was a music education major, but I was a percussion emphasis. So everything was geared towards percussion ensembles, playing vibraphone, playing marimba. I was in the Illini drumline. Section leader for a year, and I loved marching band too, and that was another influence out of junior high into high school. I marched in a drum and bugle corps, the Cavaliers out of Chicago. If I were not at Sesame Street today, I would probably still be a band director, because that was my path that I chose through music education. I did that for 3 years, and I kind of looked down the road and thought, I think I want to do something different, something more. So I went back to grad school, and I worked towards my master's in composition and arranging, which kind of led me to Los Angeles and, working with Muppets out there.
I'm just going to say, going back to something you were talking about before, Eddie Money is pretty awesome.
Right? Yeah. Well, and then oddly enough, full circle. So I get to LA, I worked on a couple of jobs. One of the jobs I had, which I held for over 10 years, was with a composer duo, Trivers Myers Music, husband and wife team. Elizabeth Myers actually co-wrote some songs with Eddie Money.
Oh, cool.
Like, co-wrote songs. So I'm like, okay, this is bizarre, because I have the 45 of Baby Hold On to Me. She didn't co-write that, but she wrote other songs. I was like, that's a small world, in the bizarre music world that we live in.
Yeah, I love retro music like Eddie Money. Obviously by my shirt, Simple Plan.
Yes.
And obviously by what I was singing earlier, Backstreet Boys.
I mean, come on. That's great.
So you were a Muppet fan before doing Muppets Tonight. So how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. What's funny, today it's so easy. It's, YouTube is ubiquitous. There's videos of everything on YouTube. When I was a kid, I do remember watching the Muppet Show, but the only real specific memory I kind of have of that is the drum battle between Buddy Rich and Animal. I seem to just remember being glued to the TV. I mean, what a moment that was. And because I got to work with Dave Grohl when he battled Animal, I mean, my head was exploding that day. So yeah, Muppets Tonight. When I moved to LA, I moved to LA on the advice and confidence building from a good friend of mine who lived in LA, and she was working for a film composer agent named Richard Marks, who was probably had 10 or 12 composers under his wing that were, his clients. He would look for jobs for them. One of his clients was Richard Gibbs. And Richard Gibbs, who started off early on as a keyboardist for Oingo Boingo, good friends with Danny Elfman and the whole Oingo Boingo band, many of which, went on to other amazing careers. Danny Elfman, of course, amazing film composer, and Richard Gibbs, also film composer, TV composer. So when I got to LA, my good friend introduced me to Richard, and Richard said, well, what can you do? And I said, here's my experience. And he said, well, when I get busy and I need you, you come over, we'll look at my studio, tell me if you're comfortable here, and then you can basically assist me. So I started assisting him on a Tracy Ullman show at the time, Tracy Takes On. So this would have been in 1995. Yeah, 95. So I would basically go to his studio in the morning. I would swab alcohol on the 2-inch tape reel, which hardly anybody uses anymore. Analog tape. He had a beautiful Trident mixing board. I was confident enough to sit at a mixing board and kind of run those things. But personally, I never really wanted to be an engineer, like a sound engineer. That was not my I wanted to create music, not mix music. So, but working with him taught me a lot about the ins and outs of a studio. And we were right on that cusp of analog to digital. So things were changing very quickly. And when I talk to students, I tell them this all the time, stay current with technology, because something's going to change tomorrow that you'll probably want to learn to help you, today. So we worked on Tracy Takes On. We worked on it was kind of like a Hallmark movie with Richard Thomas from the Waltons. It was called The Christmas Box. And I remember some very late nights cramming music into that film because, music, of course, when you're film scoring, music's like the last thing that's done. When you finally lock the picture and you look at the cut, then they're like, we need the music or the sound effects, everything has to be done. So it was a very tight schedule to get that finished. Anyway, so Richard also, because he'd also done the first season of The Simpsons as a composer and had this comedic humor music background. I forget who actually connected him to Muppets Tonight, but it might have been his agent or somebody within the Henson Company. But basically, he got called to be the music director for Muppets Tonight. And that was literally while I was working for him. So I feel like stars aligned, luck as luck would have it. I was, working with him at the time. So what happened then was I was hired as the music coordinator for the first season, and I would basically be at the studio in Hollywood. He would be at his home in Malibu composing, and I would coordinate between the writers and, the music rights people. And what are we going to do? Are we going to do an Elvis parody this week? Are we going to do, is Garth Brooks going to be doing, Fiddler on the Roof? So I coordinated all that. And basically by the second season, I was doing so much that I was then considered, basically his assistant or assistant music director to the show, because what would happen on set is we would a lot of times have a live band on set, and I would say, almost a flip of Sesame Street. I'd say about 80% of what we did on Muppets Tonight was live, maybe a little less than that, but we had a lot of live music happening, live vocals for sure. We would pre-record some, but often we would be doing live vocals. So as much as we could get the feel of the music on set, we would hire a trio, piano, bass, drums, to at least get the core groove going on set, especially if we had a guest. Whoopi Goldberg, prime example. When she was on and we did Diamonds Are Forever, or Diamonds Are Girl's Best Friend, we had a band there on set. And so my job was to conduct. Behind me was Whoopi Goldberg, in front of me was the band. And Richard just loved it because it was less pressure for him too, because I would just be doing that job, which was a blast. I mean, I loved conducting and I loved being part of that whole set feel, and having headphones on, and I could hear the band and I could hear Whoopi Goldberg's vocal. Those kinds of things on set were just magic to me. And Prince being on set playing piano live and singing a lot of what he did live that day, 2 days actually. And Garth Brooks, it just, that being my first foray into Muppets was just a blast, because not only was it, I'm working for the Henson Company, and I barely know the name Jerry Nelson. Like, Jerry Nelson became a mentor, a friend. I mean, a mentor to my wife for sure. And you should interview my wife. I'm just saying.
I would love to, actually.
I'll plug that. I'm going to make that happen.
Well, whenever I have somebody from Muppets on here, or forget Muppets, anyone on here, I always I do my research before doing these interviews, and I always try to avoid talking with them about their personal lives. And since you
hear personal and professional mix for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But since you brought it up, I can safely say this to the listeners who are not aware: Paul is married to Leslie Carrara-Rudolph, who plays Abby Cadabby on Sesame Street. And I remember telling a friend of mine whose daughter was really into Abby Cadabby when she was younger, I'm going to be chatting with Paul Rudolph, and he's married to the puppeteer who plays Abby Cadabby. She went crazy.
Oh, I love it. I love it. No, that's high praise from a fan and from kids too. It's No, I'm super proud of my wife. And back on Muppets Tonight, of course, she was Spamalot Henderson. So it was a different, one of the first song I wrote for, and this is the great thing about working for Richard Gibbs, is he let me kind of, try things and compose things and arrange things. So when an instrumental cue came up for Spamalot, Leslie and I were not dating at the time. This is not, it wasn't Richard saying, oh, you should write a song for Spamalot. It was probably Richard saying, I'm too busy. Can you write this? Or, you got an idea for this? Because Richard was really good about, this even happened when we were working on the Christmas Box or Tracy Ullman. We'd be watching a scene, and I didn't go to school for film composing. I think if you out of the top 20 film composers, I don't know, maybe a very low percentage, I would say, maybe went to school for that. But there's an instinct to that, I think. And watching films and being a fan of films, I think like anything, you start to get an ear for it. So what Richard would do is we're watching scenes of like the Tracy Ullman show, there'd be some drama and we'd watch this 5-minute scene and Richard would say, okay, where would you start the music? You know, I have to put a cue in this scene. Where would you start it? And so that was a great education for me to look at a scene and go, okay, well, I'm thinking, where would Richard start it, but where would I start it? And like, it might be a head turn or where you see the drama change in the scene. So he was super helpful about that learning process for me. And then when it came to the Spamalot song, he's like, write it, you know, it's a go-go song. And I think the impetus for that song actually came from Kirk Thatcher. Kirk Thatcher was a big fan at the time of the band Pizzicato 5, which had this quirky, like bossa nova, pizzicato strings, yes, but quirky vocals and all this stuff. And he played me a song one day and he's like, I want this to be the soundtrack of my life. And it was this pizzicato go-go song. And he's like, that's what Spamalot should be dancing to. I go, great. So I was confident enough in my ability to mimic a style, if you know what I mean. And not as a sound alike. There's different ways of approaching music that sounds like something else. One is you just call it a parody. And if you're doing Me Am What Me Am for Cookie Monster, Eli might approach it as a Sondheim song. And he might put in chord progressions in a way that the song builds that you could definitely say that's a nod to Sondheim. Of course, we can't take the melody because that's copywritten. But for Spamalot's song, it was just a go-go song. So nobody was going to sing it. I could put a little melody if I wanted, but it just had to be this quirky, upbeat little thing. So I feel honored that Richard, you know, we had enough confidence in me to say, okay, do that song. I also did Snoop Doggy Doo, which when we had Coolio on, we did a parody of Snoop, like a Snoop Dogg song, and it was called Snoop Doggy Doo, and it was Coolio dancing around with that. So I think I did that arrangement. I think when Pierce Brosnan was on, we of course did a, you know, James Bond parody, and I think I did the Goldfinger-ish arrangement of that. So, you know, that really allowed me to get my feet wet, get my hands into arrangements, scoring, getting a feel for comedy. It was a huge influence, that show. And I mentioned, you know, Jerry Nelson. Here I am working with, you know, Frank Oz and Jerry Nelson and Dave Goelz and Brian Henson. And then Bill Beretta and I became friends on that show. And I'm such a huge fan of Johnny Fiamma as a singer, as a character, as everything. That every time I see Bill, I'm like, so when's Johnny going on tour? So when are we going to do that? when's the Johnny Fiamma Lounge Act happening? And I even joked years ago with Kevin Clash. I was like, you know, Johnny should just make an appearance on Sesame Street. Just pull up in a white limo, just start singing on 1, 2, 3, 7, just for no reason. And people be like, what is Johnny Fiamma doing? So yeah, it was working with that talented cast too. Just blew me away. And hearing these character voices come out when we would pre-record the vocals, we would go to, you know, Capitol Studio A or Ocean Way, and watching them work through a song was really fascinating because Richard was the one who always checked the key. That's where I learned that from. Like, you got to make sure the key works. And then, you know, when a guest celebrity would come on, we had to, you know, send the guest celebrity a cassette usually of like, here's the songs that we're going to do. Are these keys okay for you? So, you know, Garth Brooks coming on doing country music, which was music from other countries. He did We Shall Be Free on his own song, which is amazing, by the way. He could do any style. I mean, he did a Tom Jones thing. He did Fiddler on the Roof and just had a blast doing it. And talk about another talent. I think he's even been quoted in interviews saying if he didn't grow up, I think he grew up in Nashville or in the South, as it were, he listening to country music is definitely his influence. But he's like, if I would have grown up in Chicago, I would have been into Kiss. I would have been into rock and roll. So if Garth Brooks had grown up elsewhere, I think we'd be looking at Garth Brooks, the rock and roll guy, versus, you know, what he became, which is, you know, legendary country music artist and just an amazing musician. We actually had a cut down version of We Shall Be Free, his song on Muppets Tonight. And just as a safety, what we would do, usually if it was a musical guest, they would come in the day before they tape the show, and we would pre-record, hopefully to do things live on the day. But the day before, we would pre-record things just in case something happened. What if they get laryngitis the night before they film the show? Yikes. So we wanted to have a pre-recorded vocal just in case. So Garth Brooks had his engineer send us a DAT tape with a cut down version of We Shall Be Free. And by cut down, I mean, if the original was say 4 minutes, we were doing maybe a 2.5 minute version of that or less. And we're like, Mr. Brooks, can you sing this for us just so we have it as a sample? He's like, oh, sure. Steps out in front of a mic in Capitol Studio B and sings the song. And the engineer and Richard and I think the director of the show there, we're all just there and our jaws dropped because it sounded better than the album. We'd all been listening to the album and we're like, wow, he just did that in one take. And it's as good, if not better, because he was thinking about it differently too. He was thinking about it as if he were performing with the Muppets, right? He wasn't thinking about it as he was performing it for his album, whenever that album had come out years before. So just that different emotion was like, that was perfect. So one take, we had it. And then I think what happened on the day we actually did record, we used what he did live. And I think we sweetened it a little bit with what he pre-recorded. I think it might be what ended up on tape. I think might be a combination of the two, but what a talent. And wow, I can't, a consummate professional too, knew everybody's name, shook everybody's hand, thanked everybody to their face by their name when he left the studio. I mean, just consummate pro. Big fan.
Amazing.
Anywho.
Facebook actually reminded me that today, March 8th, marks 25 years since the first episode of Muppets Tonight.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Wow. Yeah,
my favorite.
I was just thinking of it's the Sandra Bullock show that the Spamalot Henderson Go-Go song is in. Oh, and that was in April, I think, of that year. So yeah, March. Oh, yeah. So that would have been like episode 4 or 5, whatever order they aired that. Oh, and by the way, another fun fact, of course, in that scene where Spamalot is dancing to a go-go song, the shtick was it was Wall Street Wonderings with Ernest Pleth. And of course, Ernest Pleth is Jerry Nelson. And so, and Leslie will tell you this story when you interview her, but he was such, as I mentioned before, he was such a mentor to her. Their dressing rooms are right next to each other on Muppets Tonight. And, he'd help her with monitor stuff and such, but he'd also play guitar and sing every morning. Every morning she could hear him. And now, again, fast forward to 2009, I got to work with Jerry on his own CD of his own songs for a CD called Truro Daydreams.
Yep, I have that album on my phone.
Oh, great. Well, he had always wanted to do, a CD of original songs, and not kid songs, not Sesame Street songs, definitely his own songs. And some of those he was even working on back on Muppets Tonight, like singing in the dressing room. So I'm like, wow, this is, again, stars aligned, full circle. All that stuff.
I downloaded that album from my grandfather. Did you by any chance see the bonus video that I did with Joe Hennes and Ryan Rowe?
No, I did not.
Okay, first of all, Joe and Ryan say hi. I told them I was going to be chatting.
Great. Yeah.
So as I mentioned in that video, ever since I've known how to talk, this is going back to 1999. I'm turning 22 a week from today. Ever since God, I feel so old. Ever since
You feel old.
Ever since 1999, since I've known how to speak, I have been calling my grandfather Grumpy. That has been his nickname in our family ever since I've known how to talk. And I downloaded him Turo Daydreams. We have a Turo here in Nova Scotia, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And our favorite song on that album, he likes Noah's Ark because it's nice and groovy.
Yeah.
But my favorite is Tides. And the reason
it's a beautiful song.
Yeah. The reason for that is because Grumpy sails.
Oh,
and so sometimes when we're on really smooth boatways, I'll just play that, or Sailing by Christopher Cross.
Nice. I'm pulling up Tides. Let's see if I have Tides on my iTunes. Oh, actually, I don't think I do. In my iTunes, I still have like my original early mixes of the songs, and then I actually from I do have it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Such a great song.
Yeah. It was used in a lot of tributes to Jerry after he passed away.
I mean, this was a moment too, recording this, we recorded the album at NOLA in Manhattan. And
Oh, I've heard of that place.
yeah, NOLA's a legendary recording studio. It's at the top of the, well, you could call it, it's the old Steinway building. It's Steinway pianos were in the main floor and floors below ground.
Yeah, Chris Surf told me when he came on the show that when he was recording at NOLA Studios, he used to break a lot of pianos.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. But I mean, there's a little more. Yeah. I mean, Jerry's just such a pro, and me standing there amongst we had great musicians for that. We had some of the guys in the past iteration of the Sesame Street band playing playing drums on that. We had the guys playing horns were in the Sesame Street band for years. And of course Jerry playing guitar, and then his good friend, and I'll forget his name, but I should break out my Turo Daydream CD. But having his guitarist there, having his bass player there from Truro, was really just such a cool vibe. And then and Mike Renzi was actually playing keyboards on that too. So like the piano that you hear and all the piano tracks that you hear and the keyboard, it's like a Wurlitzer keyboard on Tides. That's Mike Renzi playing piano. So I mean, I'm just standing there just digging it. I mean, I'm not conducting, I would only conduct when we had to do a song that had a upbeat feel, and I was like I do with puppeteers, like cue the horns, cue the drummer, cue the bass player. So I'm just standing there like floating on the tides while they're recording this song. And then, we only, because of Jerry's condition at the time, he's on oxygen, and we were very cognizant and sensitive to his stamina, getting through. We basically booked the studio for 2 days, and we knew, we'll see how it goes the first day, how many hours we get. Do we need to come back a second day? If we do, let's make it a half day, which we did. It turned out to be a day and a half. And Jerry was just in such
hold on, a day and a half of recording the whole album?
Yeah. Just
oh, wow.
And most of it was probably more than on the first day. No, well, we kind of split it up, because on the second day, I remember there were specific people, I think, that were there. Maybe like Fran Brill was there for the Big Bad Wolf song. I know Stephanie and Leslie and Tyler were all there I think on both days when they did background vocals. So what we would do is, we would run a song a couple of times, rehearse it a little bit, record 2 passes, give Jerry a break. I'd work with the vocalists on the background, music or whatever, or the background vocals. So, but he was just in amazing spirits the whole time and not nervous. I mean, that's one of the things about Jerry performing as long as he did, just as a guitarist and singing, whether it's in a dressing room or with friends, or I don't know that he really performed on stage. I'm sure there's people that can answer that, as himself, not as a Muppet, not behind a scene of a puppet or two-headed monster or whatever. This is just him singing, and he had such an incredible voice just on his own. And I think he had this specific quality to his vocal cords. And I think anybody who watches, is a big fan of Muppets in general, always knows when it's Jerry as an AM, as a background character, and they hear that
like puppeteering wise or
voice wise, because he just has this unique quality. And yet that character voice that he does can go anywhere. It can go bass, it can go treble, it can go robin, it's just amazing range.
Well, his voice was one of the first I'd ever heard on television. I remember as a young kid back in the late 90s. Oh my God, this is turning into a 90s nostalgic episode because of my Backstreet Boys cover. But I remember watching The Count and Liam Neeson, and I remember Liam Neeson doing The Count's laugh. And ever since I was a kid, I'd practice the
Nice.
Yeah.
I think Jerry too, what blew me away about those sessions was his musicality, for one thing, his ease with just sitting there, but also, the level of musicality to sit there, you're under pressure, as it were, to record this album. I mean, for anybody, that's pressure, right? Headphones on, headphones off. He's playing guitar during the entire time. We didn't bring him back to say, okay, let's do the guitar part for this. Let's do that. We'll overdub the guitar later. He was doing everything live. So, and plus we had chairs set up at NOLA so that there was, I think at the most, maybe there were like 15 or 20 people in the room listening. It was a concert. It was a live concert. And Stephanie and Craig did a wonderful job of videotaping a lot of that. A lot of that is online. And I think every once in a while they'll pan back and show the people listening. So for Jerry, it was a performance too. It wasn't just here's these songs I've always wanted to record and get out in the world. It was I'm performing for these people. So he was so comfortable doing that. And then once I finished editing and mixing and everything, we had a little get together at the Carriage House, the Jim Henson Carriage House, and he did a little CD release party and
Aw.
played live for that as well. And I think we only did one song from the CD, but he just did a bunch of other songs. He had his bass player, had his guitar player, and I played a little snare and bongos for that. But it was, that was, as far as me and musical experiences go, that's a day and a half I will never forget. And I got to actually go up to his house and we did overdubs of the animals on Noah's Ark on his dining room table. I went up in August. We recorded the album in June. I went up to his place in August. It was seriously hot. It was 90 plus degrees, had all the windows open, and I had all my gear set up on his dining room table and a mic near him. And he did all the animal voices in Noah's Ark, and a couple other things too. We had done some extra vocals, overdubbing a few parts that I wanted him to sing, in addition to his lead vocal. So yeah, it was a dream.
Immediately when you said 90 plus degrees, I thought of another 90s band.
And
98 degrees.
98 degrees. Boom.
So
it is 90s nostalgia day, isn't it?
Every day for me is 90s nostalgia day.
There you go.
I want to ask you something that's kind of based on something I saw on Instagram, since I was mentioning the Count. Is the Count your favorite Muppet?
Well, after Abby Cadabby, come on. Yes. No, it's, I think, as a kid, I was obsessed with numbers, and I still have, in my parents' attic, it's probably in storage in California. I have a notebook when you were in first or second grade and you were learning like cursive and you were learning, penmanship. They gave you these tablets with lines on them. And I remember filling those with numbers.
Oh, wow.
And I still have those. I still have, my awkward, handwriting and numbers and things. And I don't know, subconsciously, maybe the Count had an influence on me. I don't know, but it's definitely something that is in the back of my brain. Like, something about the Count is really special to me. I mean, I think it all comes full circle with Jerry Nelson, but yes, the Count's, he's up there.
I pulled out some surprises for you.
Oh yeah.
When I was a couple months old, what you're going to see now was a gift from my Uncle Colin. It is a Count doll that I've had ever since 1999, 2000.
Wow, look at that.
I think this was one of the Sesame Street beanbag toys.
Yes, that is a classic. I love the monocle, how it's like stitched into the fabric. That's great.
My grandmother remembers that when Colin gave this to me, I was shaking because the Count was my favorite. Harry actually is my favorite now, another Jerry Nelson character.
Nice. Yep.
And I also have a little Count bendable toy.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's cool.
And a little people figure.
Oh, nice.
This one's
Very
older.
cool.
This is like from the 70s.
Yeah. Well, I do have the most recent thing I have is the Count skateboard.
Oh, cool.
And my good friend Chris Zano, our A2, he and I we're big, Count fans, but we decided to both get identical skateboards. So we got dark green wheels and like black trucks, and they're just amazing. Well, I do have a pin here. That's one of my favorite little
that's cute.
Count pins. That's sitting on my setup right here.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Counts. Yeah, Jerry.
So are there any composers from Sesame Street such as Joe Raposo, Sam Pottle, Tony Geiss, Jeff Moss, my good friend Chris Surf?
The list is like, it goes on and on.
There are so many they've all written so many classic songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any composers from Sesame Street whose work were a major influence on you and your music? And are there any songs in particular by them that were big influences for you?
Well, sadly, last spring we lost one of our composers to COVID, and he was roughly my age. I think he was 53.
Was it Adam? I can't pronounce his name.
Adam Schlesinger.
Yeah. I remember when that happened. He wrote a song that I really like called "Just the Girl" by a band called the Click Five. Any of you listeners remember the Click Five? Those guys were awesome.
A friend of mine mentioned that. Yes. Let me look up. pardon me while I just look up on Muppet Wiki what he did for us, because I know he did a couple songs, and I'm
He
just
did
going.
one of my favorites actually, which was "I Wonder," which was sung by Steve as Ernie.
Yes, okay, that was the first one that I'd heard, because that was season probably 41,
Yep, 41.
and that song blew me away because
I
it had,
cried when I heard
oh,
it,
it's beautiful,
and I'm like 11 or 12.
yeah, well, it had a similar feel to "I Don't Want to Live on the Moon." I think that was probably like not
That
a
is my
a
favorite
nod to
of
it,
them
but
all.
something similar, because it was this beautiful ballad. I think that's one
Mm.
that I really, really loved. In fact, Adam wrote the last song I recorded with Jerry Nelson, which is "Eight is Great."
Oh
Adam wrote that.
wow!
Um, and I think, let's see, I think he wrote the Elmo the musical theme. I'm looking now at Muppet Wiki page. Oh, "I Can Help," which was we did a whole special on food insecurity. Leslie was the character Lily, and we had Brad Paisley on that. Brad Paisley sang on
Nice.
that. Chrissy Ferraro wrote the lyrics. I mean, that's the thing. Composers. There are our current crop of composers. There's very few that really write lyrics and music. So you have to, when you shout out a composer, you have to shout out the lyricist as well. And Chrissy is an amazing. Christine Ferraro, amazing lyricist and writer for Sesame Street.
Yeah,
He also
she wrote
there's
the
an app
50th
for that.
anniversary special.
Yeah, amazing. And
That
Belinda
that was
Ward.
awesome.
Yeah. I Can Help. Let's see what else. Eight is Great. Something called Dream House. That was before my time.
Oh,
Garden Song, which
that
was
was on Good Luck Charlie, the Dreamhouse one, when the Muppets
ah.
came on Good Luck Charlie.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the current crop of composers. There's some amazing composers, and I mean, I'm honored to be even on the list with them, because there's Broadway caliber composers like Eli. Lin-Manuel's written for us. Chris Jackson has written for us. Bill Sherman writes a ton for us. um, we all have our niche, which is great. I mean, my niche is kind of the bombastic percussive stuff. I wrote we had a Chinese dragon episode where Nina helps the characters make a Chinese dragon out of found objects, and so like part of the body of the dragon are movie popcorn containers, and there's post-its all over it with like a little wish that you'd make. So I wrote that with like a very heavily taiko Japanese Chinese drum influence. I also wrote Bike Shop with a Beat, where Nina, it happens to be Nina again, working at the bike shop and making instruments out of found objects at the bike shop, like using putting nuts and bolts in a metal water container. And Telly had a blast playing that. Pam Arciero, who was assisting Telly, always is assisting Telly, was the right hand.
Mm.
She was playing Fenders with pencils.
Oh,
Was her
cool.
right hand. And then Leslie Abby was assisted by Jen Barnhart that day. Abby was playing the little bell on the handlebars, and also the seat, just hitting the bicycle seat
Like a drum.
like a drum. And here's I have to shout out Dick Maitland for this, the legendary. Oh, my phone is ringing, and look, it's Marty Robinson calling. What are the odds?
Hi, Marty.
I cannot pick that up, but that's incredible. Okay, I know exactly what he's calling about too. Um, so Dick Maitland, I mean, legend as far as sound goes on the set. If your listeners don't know, he's been on the show since season one, since day one, and would do live sound effects. So watching like the Simon Soundman, early sketches of Simon Soundman, Dick Maitland is doing that live. It's incredible. And he's using old cartridge tapes for the most part, where he'd have a bank of cartridge tapes, and he would literally hit those sound effects live. And you should also interview Chris Susano and Dick together, and they'll talk your
That
ears
would
off
make a good bonus video.
hours about. Yeah. I mean, sound to me is super important. As a kid, I used to record sound effects off the TV. I mean, what was I going to do with those on cassette? I don't know. Maybe I was thinking of future samplers. But Dick Maitland and that bike shop show were super helpful, because I went right to Dick and I said, look, I have to create the sound of Abby playing rhythms on a bike seat. I have to create different pitches from Fenders that, I don't even have Fenders. How can I do this? The easy ones were, when you stick baseball cards in the spokes of a wheel. I'm like, I can do that. I don't have a bike, but I can do that. So Dick Maitland and Chris, I went to their studio, and they were super helpful about creating these sounds. And I won't give away any tricks or anything, but I will say this: for the fenders, we did have bike fenders. They had fenders in their massive library of physical things that they hit, which includes like a dozen telephones and different ringers and things. So they had fenders there, and Dick said, "Okay, you're going to do this. You're going to combine the sound of that metal fender with glockenspiel, with bells.
Ooh.
So you're going to get different pitches, because the goal of the episode too was to tell kids, hey, look, here's a big fender, here's a medium-sized fender, here's a small fender. They make different pitches, right? It's like near and far. You have to at least put something in one part of the found objects that Nina was saying, these can be musical instruments, and equate that to kids saying these can be different pitches as well. So I literally combined the sound of a metal fender with glockenspiel, and they're in the mix. I would say the mix is 60% fender and 40% glockenspiel, just so there's enough pitch to make it a little different. And here's the best part: when Dick said, "Here, use this old rusty set of bells, glockenspiel," and he goes, "Oh, by the way, Joe Raposo gave me those."
Oh, that's sweet.
So again, my head exploded again. And it was this rusty old small set of bells, glockenspiel, in a wooden case. It was all dusty and rusty. And sure enough, I would use that, individually. But there were other tricks that he had that, it's funny with Foley and with sound design. Foley being, the representation of the sound that you're kind of recreating, like footsteps or something. He has so many amazing tricks for that, and those sound people kind of live in their own little world and often don't give away those secrets. So, but even the bank of like the library of sounds they have digitally. The first time I went in there, Chris was showing me the database of sounds they have. At the time they had 250,000 plus sounds, in there, and then at one point, Dick Maitland was working on Abby's wand sound effect. Just her wand, just the ring, which you think is, oh, that's a simple sound. It's just like a gliss on maybe a harp or something. Well, it's like 6 or 8 different sounds together that he builds by hand. He's literally saying, okay, I can use a harp here, maybe a gliss, like a little zing on a glockenspiel there, maybe a little cymbal or some synthesized thing. He's combining all these sounds, not just so that it's a stock sound from a keyboard that you bought online. It's Dick Maitland creating this sound for the character, for Abby. And Leslie loves that. She loves that sound because it's super. And he's got long ones, short ones, different versions. And I think Chris probably has a library of those on set. If we need to do that live, he'll do that live. So yeah, sound on Sesame Street, big part of the show.
So when celebrities come on the show, I'm going to mention some celebrities who wouldn't really be considered nostalgia, like everything I've mentioned before.
From the 90s,
Yeah, pretty much. But like celebrities like Maren Morris, Haley Steinfeld. I know that's not 90s, but I love Haley Steinfeld. Meghan Trainor. Do any of them inspire you in your music?
Oh yeah. I mean, anybody that comes on that has had music video experience, let's start there. They are so comfortable on set and in front of a camera. Now, the variable, of course, is Muppets. There are celebrities that instantly react to and can play off Muppets. And there's some that are less comfortable doing that take a little time to kind of warm up to that. But also watching their work ethic, Meghan Trainor in particular, has probably, all these celebrities that have done music videos, they've spent undoubtedly super long days on video sets listening to one song over and over and over and over again, and somehow eking out the energy that it takes to deliver every single word, whether you're lip syncing or dancing or whatever. And she was so into it. When we did Count Me In, which is, another legendary Sesame Street song. I think, is that a Jeff Moss?
It's Emily Kingsley, I believe. I'm not sure who composed it.
Yeah, I'll look that up too. But we knew, like, this was all shot on green screen, and all around her were these big green screen cubes that were basically going to be projected images of kids and families. And the song Count Me In is very inclusive. It's talking about skin color, it's talking about hair color, it's talking about being a twin. amazing, across the board inclusion song. And so, if you think about a non music video experienced person on a set with just a bunch of green cubes, like how do you emote that and deliver that song in a way that's going to, I know there's going to be twins, projected on this cube over here. And then there's going to be Muppets in a family over here. You just have to find that emotion, as a person standing there dancing and lip syncing. And she did it. I mean, she nailed it and was super comfortable. She, I think she recorded all of her vocals at home in her home studio, which often the celebrities will do on their own time. But she also had a bunch of her family members like sing the shout chorus at home, like just count me in. She had, a bunch of people in the back. So I'm like, well, that's cool. Just getting people into the spirit of it by bringing them into your studio, whether they're singers or not, and just having them chime in. And shout out to our director for that too. That was part of our, we shot that in LA with Jack Jameson directing, which was going to be part of the 50th special. And there's a moment, I think in the video, it's maybe 2 seconds of Abby flying. Of course, when Abby flies, it's a green screen effect. She has a very specific version of Abby that has a green screen trigger for her wings to move. And of course, when Abby flies, you want a fan on her. You want to see her hair and the fabric moving around. So we probably spent, and I have video of this, we probably spent 10 or 15 minutes just shooting Abby flying. But we had plenty of time. Jack was a great director and very efficient at time management, and we knew we had time to do it. But I have a video, and it's of Leslie, of course, as Abby. She's just doing Abby's, she's just lip syncing and mostly just flying and dancing and having fun. I think Chris Hayes is maybe doing the wings.
Oh yeah, I saw a picture of that.
Yeah, there's probably one online because I don't
Chris
know
Hayes,
if I
Matt
posted
Vogel, and Peter
Matt Vogel,
Linz.
Peter Linz, and then Ryan Dillon is fanning Abby with like a big cue card or something, like getting. So, I'm looking at like the experience not only of Leslie and all these other people around her, but there were probably like 60, 70 years of puppeteering experience just working on Abby flying, and it's in the video for 2 seconds. That's what I love about directors when they have a vision of like, yep, I definitely need a shot of Abby flying. Let's do. And then, when Meghan Trainor was there, I think it was mostly Abby and Elmo on set live with her. I think they incorporated other Muppets into the green screen footage. But yeah, it's, watching celebrities. Yeah, I think it's the Muppet factor. I mean, especially when they're acting with them, that's a whole nother thing. I'm working with them on just the music portion. My job is pretty easy with that. I'm basically watching their lip sync. And if they're using a monitor with, the crawl of the lyrics and they're using a teleprompter, I kind of help them with that. Of course, they've done that. Most of them have done that 1,000 times too. But, then you watch somebody like Alan Cumming, who, is a theater guy who has done amazing work on stage and memorized ridiculous amounts of words, like in his one-man Scottish play, I think, which Leslie saw and blew her away. He did the Grouch song with us. You
gotta look for the slime.
Yeah, and so he recorded that in my office at Kaufman.
Oh, cool.
It was just incredible. It was really great to see him not only pre-record it, but he had to figure out the character before he went on set. So he had the script and he knew the vibe. Basically, he knew that this is, he's going to be incorporating a grouchiness to everything he does, and he's going to be dressed as a grouch, but he still hadn't said a word as the character yet. So he had to kind of figure that out in the room with me as he sang it. So as he was singing it, he was kind of discovering the character. And we just had a blast recording it because he was, I mean, again, consummate pro. Same with Michael McKean. When Michael McKean was on, he sang in my little office studio too. And when he did the I Wanna Rock, and he did, he's of course of Spinal Tap fame. And I was just pinching myself that day. But he, instead of doing a British rocker, he'd done that a lot, and he didn't want to do a British rocker because it was too Spinal Tap. So he did kind of a Southern rocker.
Oh,
and
wow.
Just had a blast with that. And came in with his hair in this weird like comb over, and they put the wig on him and everything. It was
Kind of
just,
like an 80s style.
yeah,
A little farther retro for me.
right, a little further, yeah. But I
Well,
mean, he just embodied it. He was just so into it and way into the song, and
mm,
just, yeah, that was a
mm.
blast.
Before I get to the next, before I get to the next question, I will say, since we're talking about retro music, going back to Muppets Tonight, one of my favorites, actually my very favorite moment from Muppets Tonight was Bobo and Cindy Crawford
Oh
and
God,
Rizzo
yeah.
doing a version of "I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt," and
Oh my God, yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow.
and I was thinking what would be really funny is to, gotta stay with the times. A lot of the songs that were performed on Muppets Tonight, some of them were current, some of them were, it was just like the Muppet Show, a lot of
Yeah,
older hall songs.
right.
It would have been interesting to see Pepe doing "I Like to Move It" or "Wannabe." If you want to be my lover, you
Yeah,
gotta get with my
yeah.
friends, okay? And I can easily picture Miss Piggy singing "Kiss Me" by Sixpence None the Richer.
Oh my God, yeah. There you go. Wow. See, you need to be pitching these to Disney and the Muppets. Um, yeah, the Cindy Crawford day was bizarre. That was a long day. I think that was one of those like 2 in the morning wrap times or 1 in the morning.
Oh, jeez.
Because there was so much to do. She was in so many different sketches, and a lot of it was wardrobe. They had to change wardrobe for the Mickey Mouse parody that we did. Um, and I remember that day she had to like dance with Bobo.
Oh
And
yeah.
the big difference between the Sesame Street set and Muppets Tonight was the Muppets Tonight set was built 3 feet off the ground, or 3.5, 4 feet, whatever it was, so that the celebrity could be on a platform walking, and the Muppeters could be standing, moving around on the floor, not on the platform. So picture Bill Beretta and whoever was assisting him that day. There, Bobo is kind of at her waist height, to do this dance, and she's in high heels and this dress and on a platform that's
Ooh.
not crazy wide. It's maybe, I don't know, 2.5, 3 feet wide, trying to do these dance moves and spins and stuff. I mean, it's not easy to do. And plus, you had to, I think they may have had somebody like a spotter, like just in case, you need to have somebody nearby in case she falls over, there's a platform there. It's 3 feet off the ground. So that took a while. That took a while to
Yikes.
film just that dance sequence. Um,
Holy
yeah,
crap.
just for the physicality of it, moving with a Muppet on that platform. Whereas at Sesame Street, none of the sets are built off the ground unless we're doing like a swing set where it's maybe like Elmo's room, or Elmo and Louie, like in Elmo's bedroom, we'll raise that set off the ground so that the puppeteers can move easily. But the Sesame Street set is all at ground level. So
Mm. So,
yeah, Muppets Tonight.
mm. So when you record with the Sesame Street Muppets, it's usually just the puppeteers doing the character voices. Does it ever feel weird to watch them record without the puppets on their hand?
No, I'm kind of used to that by now. But I'll say what's fascinating is the physical contortions they get into to create these voices, because their whole bodies are into it. And of course, when you are emoting a song, you want to be able to freely move and dance, and so often they're doing that in the studio as well, and they're dancing and grooving around. But like Marty in particular, Marty just screaming out a Telly Monster song is just hilarious to me. And Marty has probably the loudest voice of any cast member on the
Oh
set.
wow.
Telly, I
I
mean,
never
not
thought of it
only
that way.
Telly, but Marty's voice in general is his voice just projects just very naturally. And I have a very high quality decibel meter, and I brought that into the set one time. And I go, Marty, I just, out of curiosity, I want to just get your decibel level. He's like, what? Okay. He barely even warmed up, and he gave me a couple Telly yells, and I think it hit like 114 dB. And if you look on a chart of decibel levels, I think a chainsaw is right in there at like 120. And Marty was at like 116. And he's like, I'm barely warmed up. I could go more than that. I'm like, well, I don't want to hurt your voice today, Marty. Let's good. But yeah, he's
Especially because Telly
the
has such a
power.
rough voice.
Yeah, right. And he just, and Snuffy as well. The way he gets into the Snuffy character is really fascinating. And of course, there's a very special microphone that we use for Snuffy for that, which has this tube in it that kind of helps create that. I mean, it's 90% Marty, with that bizarre nasally kind of sound, but the microphone trick like adds to that sound, which is very cool.
Mm. So as I said, I did a video with Joe Hennes and Ryan Rowe from Tough Pigs. It was what I call a nostalgia talk bonus, which basically, you should really check some of those out. Sometimes I'll put together like clip shows of past shows. I did one that was a tribute to Carol Spinney, and I had
Oh, cool.
I took out recordings from episodes I did with Kevin Carlson, Joe Matthew, and Ivy Austin when they were
Oh,
on
wow.
here, and
Yeah.
they talked a little bit about Carol Spinney, and so as a tribute, I grouped those together and I put that out. And I also do like showcases of toys, VHS tapes. Yes, I have a collection of VHS
Oh,
tapes.
wow.
Big surprise, right?
Right.
Maybe a CD, or I'll just talk about a film or a TV show. I did one where I compared Disney's Inspector Gadget film to the cartoon. I did one where I compared the movies 10 Things I Hate About You and Never Been Kissed together, because they both came out when I was a couple of weeks old, but they were so similar type of films.
Yeah.
Or I'll just maybe even bring back past guests. I haven't done it yet, but I'm hoping to. And Joe Hennes and Ryan Rowe came on here in celebration of the Muppet Show on Disney Plus. So we just spent a whole hour talking about the Muppet Show. And I'm actually doing one of those tomorrow, and Brian J. Jones is going to be joining me. Do you know who that is?
That name sounds familiar. Remind me.
He's the author of the book Jim Henson: The Biography.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the Muppet Show. So to prepare for that, do you have a favorite song that was ever performed on the Muppet Show?
On the Muppet Show, well, it's got to be the drum battle between Buddy Rich and Animal.
Good answer.
Technically, it's not a song. I mean, yes, it's a song as a drummer musician goes.
Yeah. Well, my favorite song that was ever performed on the Muppet Show, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about that tomorrow. I already shot. It's going to be done in two parts. Part one is me talking about the Muppet Show and some of my favorites. Part two is my chat with Brian. My favorite song from the Muppet Show actually was Jerry. It was him doing Billy. It was him doing Billy Joel's New York State of Mind. It was so beautiful.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad it's on Disney Plus, because I mean, YouTube is a rabbit hole when you start to just search for songs and things. But I love just being able to see the shows top to bottom, and not just a song. But I do remember that song.
Yeah, I always binge watch shows on Disney Plus top to bottom. Go ahead and get a kick out of this, but I am actually now binge watching Blossom.
Wow. Okay. Well, she was in what's the side
the Big Bang Theory?
Yeah,
that was such a funny show.
That's Blossom. Yeah.
I got to meet Blossom's best friend, Jenna Von Oy, once. I met her in LA.
Nice.
And I actually met Peter Linz the next day.
Ah.
Yeah,
nice.
and we're still close. And now he's doing my favorite character, Harry.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, Harry, the Jerry stuff from back in the day. Well, and Two-Headed Monster too, because we were just talking to somebody about Two-Headed Monster and Discovery and such, and I think it was when and Martians too, the Yip Yip Factor. I think
my grandmother loved the Martians.
Yeah, well, Sonia or Emilio posted a thing on Valentine's Day, and it was an old clip of Maria and Luis and the Martians watching them. And they were like, and they were looking at each other, staring, eyes staring. And then they were hands holding. And then they were hugging.
You do it well. You do it very well.
It was really sweet. And just the fact that the Martians just appeared and were looking at them, trying to figure it out. And, I could hear, it was Jerry and Marty at the time.
Yeah, I think it was.
So.
Yeah, my grandmother said that my grandmother just passed away about 6 months ago from Alzheimer's disease, but she always said that the Martians were a scream. That was her word for it.
A scream.
Yeah, she loved the Martian. I was telling Lewis Henry Mitchell this last month when I had him on here, but she loved the Martians, the Twiddlebugs, the Count, Sherlock Hemlock, Sam the Robot, and the Number Painter, who's probably now serving time in prison for vandalism. Gonna paint a 5 today.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and that's the thing about. I do remember this from Sesame Street early on, and it was Lefty. It was, hey, you want to buy an S?
Oh yeah, my dad loved Lefty.
My friends and I, we used to parody that. We used to act that out. I don't know how old I was, maybe 5 or 6, but older for sure. Because I think the amazing thing that Sesame Street taught kids without them even knowing it was comic timing.
Oh,
when they watch Frank Oz and Jim Henson working off each other and playing off each other and ad-libbing and improvising and things. It's amazing. Did you happen to see the new documentary that it was just on? It premiered at Sundance virtually.
I tried to, but they wouldn't let me in because it wasn't available here in Canada. Even Emilio
Okay.
Delgado tried to help me out. Nothing.
Yeah, it was hard because it was I think it filled up quickly. They had a certain number that could actually watch it, which I thought was strange because I'm like, it's just virtual, right? Can't a million people watch it? And somehow it was limited. But it's really well done. And there's a moment in there. It's very, lot of great videos of John Stone talking about the early days and Joe Raposo videos that I'd never seen. But there was a moment because, we deal with curriculum all the time. That's the point of the show is, you want to teach and you want to entertain and you want to combine the two. And we always look to the past. I look to the past all the time for songs and think about how they would have approached things musically, educationally. And there's a moment where it's, Jim Henson is just doing something crazy with a puppet and he comes down and he goes, "What are we teaching here?" and John Stone yells out, "Happiness."
Oh, I love that.
Boom, brilliant. We're just teaching happiness. And I think part of if you asked, Jim Henson or Frank Oz today, sadly we can't ask Jim Henson this, but I'm like, I'd love to ask Frank Oz, do you realize you were teaching them comic timing too?
I'll pass that along to Frank.
Because I think that's part of it too. I mean, why else would I mimic, "Hey man, you want to buy an S? An S!" Shh. Like
an
that.
S, right.
That's comic timing.
So for the first time in a long time, somebody has actually sent me fan questions, or just one fan question.
A fan question for me?
I hardly ever get these. I always post on Facebook and Instagram, "Send me any fan questions you have." I rarely ever get them, but for the first time ever, I've got one.
Wow. I'm shocked and happy that it's for me.
I think you'll be
Is
shocked.
it just for general?
I think you'll be shocked at what it is. It could be considered a general question. This one comes from my dad.
Oh.
And he wants to know, since you live in New York, are you a Yankees fan or a Mets fan?
I can easily say neither.
Oh, no, wow.
I should, because I live, we've not been to either game.
Okay.
But the Mets are closer, obviously, than Yankee Stadium, because we're in Queens. I should be a Mets fan. I'm sorry, I'm definitely not a Yankees fan. I can't.
Then you and my father would get along well.
Okay, good. So in order of who I don't like, Yankees are first. I grew up in Illinois, so I literally grew up between Chicago and St. Louis. So I was torn between Cardinals and Cubs, and I chose the Cubs, but they were terrible back then. I mean,
until recently.
Yeah, after the drought, that was great. But that's funny. Your dad asked that question. That's great.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming to the show today. And and this really means a lot to me, thank you very much for being here to help me wish my best friend Sean happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Sean. That's great.
Yeah.
That is and the fact that we can all Zoom and you could Zoom with Sean too, that's important, Yeah.
Well, it's so funny because we were actually video chatting about a month ago, and then just after we finished the video chat, I heard from you for the first time about being on the show. So I texted her and I was like, I know that we just finished up a video chat, but I got some exciting news.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, James. I mean, this has been really fun. It's never, I always think I'm rambling, telling stories, and I know I'll go off on 7-minute tangents.
I'm like that too.
My history, but yeah, bottom line is I'm honored to even be a part of the machine that is Sesame Street, because it's of the legacy and the legacy of the show, but also the legacy of the music. I mean, just putting Joe Raposo's name on a project back that started it, and I think set the bar. I think he was the one who said, we're never going to pander and talk down to kids musically. We want to lift them up. So, the songs that he and Moss and all those guys wrote there's some complex songs in there. If you look at the melodies and the chords, there's jazz chords, there's all this stuff going on, and you're still educating and you're still entertaining to that audience. I think the fun part for me too is to think about the fans, like what the parodies that we do, which when we did a lot of the Crummy Pictures parodies, doing like Les Miserables.
Oh yeah, those were awesome.
And Star S'mores, and throwing music into those is just such a blast to do, because I think, again, seeing Victor Borge when I was a kid and that humor influence is really taken me aback to some of the stuff we do on Sesame. And I got to say too, my history and starting on Sesame Street, my first day, which was actually my wife and I, it's our first date anniversary, which was December 1st, 2008. My first day was with Emilio.
Oh,
and
awesome.
he was singing and playing live. He did the Cow Monster Pair song, which happened like 5 or 6 times within the show. I think it was Elmo and Telly were the cow monsters. And so Luis, Emilio would just pop in and sing a little song on acoustic guitar and then pop out. And it was, I had met him before. I mean, I'd met a lot of people on set because my wife was obviously part of the show. I had visited the set. I had met him. Leslie had met him years before at her agent's because I think they had the same voiceover agent. And she happened to see him, in the lobby of the agency waiting for an audition tape or something. And was like, she was just speechless. She's like, "Oh my God, you're Luis from Sesame Street." My wife can be very, very dramatic and excited about those things.
That was me when I met Peter. When I met Peter Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, we're still fans, right? We're fans at heart, and I was just nervous to be working with Emilio, and went to his dressing room. We talked about the song. We went through the chords on the guitar and chatted a little bit with it. And because the same song occurred 5 or 6 times, the lyrics were different in all of them, right? Because the lyrics were talking about what Telly and Elmo were doing. So the lyrics were different. And he goes, "Can you help me? Can you like stand really close to the camera and help me like mouth the words?" And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm thinking I'm a 4-year-old going, Luis needs my help. Like, whereas as a kid, you're like watching the show, Luis is helping everybody. Maria's helping the kids. And I'm like, wait, Luis needs my help. This is an honor. Like, just the fact that Emilio Delgado, as an actor, musician, is asking me for my help. My head exploded the first day.
Wow.
On set. And that was a moment too, because it was live. That was one of those things where, it was live on set. It was live music. Here's this legendary, legacy actor, performer on set. Plus I had to watch out where the camera was because like the camera was moving. So I was like standing and kind of moving with the boom camera, the jib camera, and kind of watching Emilio and kind of helping him with the lyrics. So that was day one.
That's amazing. Well, and you're still going strong. I love it.
Going strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to the listeners, stay tuned for tomorrow with my chat, which is going to be in video form with Brian J. Jones. Let me know. Let us know any of your favorite Muppet Show moments that you'd like us to talk about. I'm curious now. So I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.